Welcome to The Better Life with Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston. Join Dr. Pinkston today as she teaches you how an integrative approach to health, combining holistic and contemporary medical information, can lead you to the better life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston, and welcome to The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. Today, I am so honored to bring you a board-certified interventional cardiologist and the traditional cardiologist. He's practiced for over 20 years, very knowledgeable. I've seen him speak at A4M, and he is also a functional medicine advocate and as soon to be at his credentials as board-certified at in integrative medicine there at A4M, and so excited to have him on today. And this is Sanjay Bhojraj. I love him. It's such a beautiful, beautiful name. Welcome in.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. It was a bear to try and spell. I probably spell my name 5 to 10 times a day on average. But Dr. Pinkston, so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you have got a lot of great things going on. I really would love to hear a little bit about you and about how you went from traditional cardiology into the integrative world. It's always a great story.
I get that all the time when I tell people at an integrative or functional medicine meeting that I'm an interventional cardiologist. They look at me sideways and like, do you really belong here? And, when we look, though, at the trends in the United States with metabolic disease and insulin resistance and coronary artery disease and heart failure increasing, I think we need more cardiologists in this space, not less. And so I, have an origin story. When you hear origin stories from most functional medicine practitioners, it's like, I got sick and I overcame it. Thankfully, I haven't had a heart attack yet or heart bypass, but I did have a bunch of patients with that, right? So as an interventional cardiologist, for those of you who don't know, I am the heart attack doctor. I'm the doc that you would meet at 2 a.m. when you come in sweaty with chest pain or belly pain or jaw pain or whatever it was. And we'd whisk you away to a place called the cardiac cath lab, where I would go into the artery in the wrist or artery in the leg and take pictures of the blood vessels of your heart and find out where the blockage is and open up with a balloon and a stent, which is like a metal spring that we put inside the artery. And I loved it for so many years. And about 15 years into my career, 10 to 15 years, I started getting repeat business, right? And when you watch Shark Tank, they always talk about, what is your repeat business reorder rate and these sorts of things. And it makes sense if you're selling widgets or sprockets or whatever. But when you're a cardiologist, and particularly an interventionalist having repeat business, that means that people are having cardiac events again, right? Yeah. And this is despite being on what we call in the conventional universe of optimal medical therapy. So getting your LDL cholesterol to a certain level, which we're always moving the goalposts and telling people you need less and less cholesterol, right? Getting the blood sugar to an optimal level, getting the blood pressure to an optimal level, going so far as to staple people's mouths shut if they were still smoking, right? I mean, doing whatever you could to treat and to optimize these conventional risk factors. But people were still, despite that, kind of breaking through. And I realized there is something that we're really missing here. There's a part of the equation that in the conventional universe we're not talking about. And one of the funny things was that whenever I'd have a patient, initially when you meet in the ER, it's just go, go, go. But then afterwards, I'd always ask, what's going on in your life? Are you stressed or what's happening? And we asked those questions, but really didn't have the tools to engage in those therapies, right? Like I'm not a therapist. I'm not like a stress management expert. In fact, I'm a stress ball myself, right? But we ask these questions and don't have the framework as to how to help people. And what I learned, it was really that mental, emotional, spiritual side of the patient's lives that in the conventional world, we are not trained to deal with, right? In fact, cardiologists are like anti-feeling doctors. Like, we don't want to learn about your feelings, right? A lot of times. But that's really what drives so much of disease is like mindset and sleep and lifestyle and environment. And so in a really backwards way, I fell into functional medicine, and it gave me the tools that I knew that I needed to complement my skill set in the conventional world to really take care of patients. And so I continued in my conventional practice for about 5 years or so, trying to marry both worlds. And it became increasingly evident to me, sometimes you don't choose your path in life, it chooses you. And so I was just pulled towards this gravity of, somebody needs to be a cardiologist focusing on these non-conventional things, and meaning like mental, emotional, spiritual, having these conversations, teaching people how to sleep, teaching people about how the type of light that you have in your house or the frying pans that you use might affect your cardiovascular health. And so, that was really kind of this realization I had. And it's just been such a great ride because I've been so impactful for so many people since I was able to make that switch.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. And then why you are sitting here with me, because I'm so interested. I'm so in love with everything you just said is so true. We do need more cardiologists. We need a lot of specialists to join us on this. But you have developed now, because you've gone are you leaving the cardiology interventional area now?
So I don't do procedures anymore, but, I certainly do. I kind of call myself now an integrative cardiologist. So I have like a boutique telehealth practice here in California that I run. So I'm still, you can take the boy out of cardiology. You can't take the cardiology out of the boy, right? So I still see everything through that lens of cardiovascular disease, cardiometabolic disease. And, with this additional layer of like the longevity lens and the biohacking lens and the functional medicine lens, looking at cardiovascular health in a pretty unique way.
Beautifully. And so I bring that up on purpose too, because of this program that you've developed, Well 12, correct?
Yeah.
A little bit about that.
Yeah. So Well 12 is my signature cardiometabolic program. What most people don't realize when it comes to risk factors is that our metabolic derangements or our metabolic insufficiencies, meaning insulin resistance and all these things, start years before heart disease manifests, right? And I'm talking about 10, 15, 20 years before. And one of the things that I saw in my practice so frequently was, I'd get men generally in their late 40s, early 50s that would come in with heart attack. And when I'd ask them, when was the last time you saw the doc? A doctor, just any doctor, they would say, oh, probably my high school football physical, right? So there's this huge period where guys in particular who are not necessarily as good about their health as women are, missed the boat. And there was this whole lost 20 years where had somebody gotten in and taught these folks how to eat. And it's not just men, women do it too, right? But taught them how to eat, taught them how to sleep, right? How to use wearable devices to get insights and read the executive summary dashboard of your body, right? Like we could avoid all these heart attacks. Now I say the best way to manage a heart attack is to manage to never get it in the first place. So that's really what I'm trying to do is through diet, through lifestyle, really help people understand how to optimize their body. What are the science and evidence-based things and what's kind of like garbage, right? Because I think that I had somebody on my podcast the other day and she was talking about her concept of infobesity is that we have so much information, it's overwhelming and you don't know who to trust. And unfortunately, when it comes to Instagram or TikTok, it's whoever has better dance moves or whatever that often gets more views, but they might not necessarily have the expertise needed. So in my program, I've kind of filtered a lot of that out. We focus on things that are scientifically proven. So sleep optimization, light optimization, intermittent fasting, low carb diets, kind of like these, managing stress, which I think is a huge one for most of us. So things that are really going to shift the needle, but more so than just you're in my program for 12 weeks and good luck to you. It's really changing your approach, your lifestyle, because that's what really needs to change. It's not just a singular, I'm going to go on a diet so I can fit in a bathing suit kind of mindset. It's I'm going to change my life so that I can live longer and live better.
Ultimately, if you do it for long enough, you can get into that bathing suit.
We've got great results. So on average, over the first 12 weeks, guys will lose about 26 pounds, women about 21 pounds. And we've got people that really do adopt the lifestyle, keeping it off for years. And this is, by the way, without medications. Yes. This is eating foods that have one ingredient because what a bell pepper ingredient is? Bell pepper. What's chicken? It's made out of chicken, right? Like it's not dihydromonosodium, this, that, and the other. If you need a PhD in biochemistry to pronounce an ingredient in your food, it's probably not something that your body was designed to eat, right? So really kind of a whole food, plant forward diet, not vegan, because I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for people either. But eating the right proteins and reshaping the conversation you have around food, giving your body. And what I find a lot is when you give the body the foods, the fibers, the micronutrients that it needs, that food noise, that volume on that food noise button goes way down because your cells, when your cells are happy, you got happy cells, happy organs make happy humans, and there you go. So just giving your body what it needs is so impactful. And weight loss is a side effect of health, right? So if your body is in balance, it has the precursors, everything that it needs, you're gonna lose not just weight, but you're gonna lose the correct weight, right? You're gonna keep your muscle. You're gonna lose the visceral fat, which is so metabolically active and deranges so many things. You're gonna lose that muffin top stuff. And I've seen it again and again and again. And what we see in the program is, people who have symptoms of hormone imbalance, like women in menopause, like that feels better. Thyroid issues, autoimmunity gets better. Insulin resistance. I can't tell you how many people are coming off of their diabetes meds and coming off of their blood pressure meds that have been on for years, because we're getting to the root cause. We're helping inflammation. We're helping oxidative stress. We're helping your body heal. When we say heal, but we're helping restore the natural balance that your body wants. And it is amazing how our bodies are just designed to function correctly when we fuel them correctly.
Absolutely. And we've had several podcasts now. It seems to be a new theme that, trust your body. Your body has what it needs to, you just have to feed it and, provide that. So this is you gatewayed us right there into talking about some of the rescues that have presented themselves over the last couple of years and become so popular. That is the GLP-1 medications. And I think as, integrative doctors, you and I both know that, yes, people need tools. Yes, there are good things about, medications. There are plenty of bad things about medications. It's always kind of a teeter-totter, so what is a loaded question. What is your, right? Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No, but I get it. I mean, it's a popular conversation to have right now, but I think it's an important conversation to have, right? Because, I think I read the other day, 12% of American adults are on some sort of a GLP-1 receptor antagonist medication. And you would know these trade name as Mounjaro and Ozempic and Wegovy and all of these things, because I think, weight health is an important part of our overall health discussion. And I've really evolved over time with this, because being a now integrative doctor, my goal is to try to get people off of as many medications as possible. And now adding a medicine seems difficult. What we were seeing a lot in the earlier versions of these medications was significant muscle wasting and bone wasting. So you weren't just losing fat, you were losing a lot of different things. And in one of the most kind of frustrating medical things, approaches to this, they were then compounding or adding in medications to counteract the side effects of the medication that we're giving you, right? So it results in, you're giving a medicine against a side effect, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're on 12 different medicines. Absolutely crazy. So I was really, I'm a big fan of natural approaches, and that's why in Well 12, we're not supplementing you with anything. It's just really diet, lifestyle, mindset. But what I realized is that, for people, obesity is a disease, right? It's a biochemical imbalance. And there's a beautiful paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, must have been about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, on the physiology of hunger. So and I think it's free access, if I remember correctly. So anybody, any practitioners or anybody, just go look, and you don't even have to read the article, which is admittedly pretty nerdy, but there's a beautiful kind of central illustration that just really shows the complex dynamics and the complex interplay of this physiology of hunger. The point being that it's not just one thing, right? It's so many different things that come together as a symphony. It's like you've got the violins and the trumpets and the cellos and the flutes, all coming together in the symphony of biochemical function. But, just like in an orchestra, if you quadruple or 10x the tuba section, it's just going to sound off, right? It's going to be the same music. It's just not going to seem the same way. And I think of that, with any really kind of medical intervention in the past 20 to 25 years, I guess since I've been a doc, which is kind of depressing when I put those numbers together. But anytime we have overloaded the body with a naturally occurring substance, something bad happens, right? And I think of like epinephrine, right? We all need epinephrine, adrenaline, we need that to function. But if you Pulp Fiction style inject it into the heart, bad things happen, right? So that is kind of the hammer that we're hitting ourselves on the head with the doses of these GLP-1 medications. And there are going to be imbalances that are created there, with this whole complex interplay. You can't just get 10 more tuba players and expect the music to sound the same. Absolutely. So I realized that, the horse is out of the barn with these GLP-1 medications, and I don't mind them, right? I think that they're a very useful tool, but they're exactly that. They're a tool, not something that we should rely on, right? So they're a slingshot, not a crutch, is kind of how I think of them. So what is missing as part of that equation of therapy is how do we support people on there? How do we make sure that you're getting the right macronutrients and micronutrients? How do we make sure that you're getting enough protein? Because essentially what we're doing with a lot of these GLP-1s is creating a medically induced anorexia, right? A medically induced eating disorder. And, I unfortunately have a daughter who suffers from eating disorder. So I know it is not a good thing to have. And so, what can we do to give people the tools to maintain the good weight, right? Meaning the lean muscle, the bone density while they're on, but more importantly, give them the tools, the mindset, the frameworks to come off of these medications at some point in time and to continue to enjoy the success that they had on the medication, but with those bolstered tools for lifestyle optimization so that they can keep that weight off. You're not losing the hard work that you've done. And I'm sure you've seen it, Marianne, the same way that I have, is like when people were even doing things as extreme as going to surgical interventions, lap bands and getting part of their stomach cut out and kind of all these things, they would lose the weight initially, but then they would gain it back because we didn't teach them the lifestyle habits, right? So that's really an important thing to have. And I'm just going to close my door. I know we're live TV, but let me just close this real quick. My dog is brown barking.
We all good. I hear a lovely little dog.
Yeah, he's my chief inclusion officer. I call him Ziggy. He's got such FOMO. He wants to be included on all of my Zoom meetings. But
it's so cute. No problem at all. This is a family show, so we're good. So yeah, in that then, I know now becoming more and more popular is the thought now that it treats so many other things too. Yeah. I think we talked about that a little bit before, and I'd like to touch on it and then kind of go back to this. But the, inflammation in general, because inflammation, right, is now we're discovering it really is the root of all evil. And so, and there's numerous ways, of course, to attack inflammation, but these GLPs are starting to do that as well. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the same, not just the studies, but probably clinically, just seen the same.
Well, and that's really what has shifted my approach to this, because it goes beyond just being a weight loss molecule into so many different things. But when we talk about root cause, right, let's talk about root cause here for a little bit, right? Because dysbiosis is something, leaky gut. That's something we talk about all the time in functional medicine. And we see dysbiosis as causing leaky gut, endotoxemia, and all these different things. But where do we get endogenous GLP from? It's from a healthy microbiome, right? It is a signal that signals to our brain from our gut, hey, we've got food. We don't need to eat, just take have a Coke and a smile and hang out. But when we have dysbiosis, that signaling is off. Medications that we take on a regular basis affect GLP-1 levels as well, like statins, right? How many cardiology patients are on statin drugs? Statin drugs will change your microbiome, alter the microbiome, and reduce your endogenous GLP-1 secretion. So now we wonder, why are people becoming insulin resistant on statin medications? Well, there you go. That's creating an imbalance in one situation, creating an imbalance in another. I often call this the Jurassic Park problem, is when you mess with nature, nature will mess back with you, right? So if we are altering something, not realizing all the it's not an unintended consequences, but all the other effects that are associated with this, we're going to create side problems, right? We're going to, and we call these side effects, but it's really just an effect, right? This is how the body is supposed to work. So, and that again just speaks to why we have to be very prudent about any medication, in the conventional world or functional medicine world, because remember, supplements are medicines too. They're just marketed from a different company, right? So they have biochemical effects in the same way that medications do. So we have to be very intentional about how we approach this. And of course, there's limits to our understanding. I'm not saying that you have to be an encyclopedia. I mean, that's why we have Google and AI and kind of all these things to kind of help us in that decision-making process. But we need to make sure that we're optimizing lifestyle and diet first, because I truly believe, and I've seen it, in hundreds of patients now through my programs, is that if you optimize that, almost 80 to 85% of the time, whatever the presenting symptom is, gets better. And then for those remaining 15% of people, you can go to like a microdose, getting back to your original question of GLP-1, because it is anti-inflammatory. It does have brain health benefits and help in like rheumatoid diseases and autoimmune diseases. So I'm not denying that it helps people. We just need to kind of fertilize the soil as much as we can before we put the seeds in, right? And that's when you really get good, a good response.
Absolutely. And thank you. I really would love to focus a little bit on inflammation. Yeah. And two things. One, you said microdose, which is really, really important, because that's a new buzzword for everybody now, right? We're going to microdose. And so, realizing that more and more and more medication does not equal more and more and more effects or quicker or better or anything, spend a minute on microdosing and how, what that really means and how, I guess, how it's done. I don't want people to do it on their own, but, how it's done and why that's so important to use just a little bit instead of a whole massive lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's really that, like going back to the orchestra example, it's adding 1 tuba instead of 10, right? So it's giving your body that extra little nudge, right? Yes. Without overwhelming the amounts going on. And in interventional cardiology, we're always worried because we're working with X-ray cameras and things. So we have this principle we call ALERA, as low as reasonably accepted, right? Or acceptable. So you want to give, when you're using an X-ray camera, you want to give the lowest amount of X-ray that gives you the best image that you can go off of. Because of course, if I'm sitting here looking at a screen, working on your heart, you don't want me to look like, you don't want me to be working through something that looks like fog. At the same time, I don't want to induce a cancer by giving you 10x the radiation that you need through an X-ray camera, right? So that's the idea of this as low as reasonably acceptable. So similarly with these medications, right? Like what is the lowest dose that we can give you that's still going to get that clinical benefit? And that's where this concept of microdosing comes from, is being a little bit closer to the physiologic ranges of these medications, not blasting you with 100 or 1,000x of what you need. So again, it's just that subtle little nudge that, maybe turns down that food noise volume, or it turns off that inflammatory cascade. And you mentioned inflammation, so central to everything. And kind of even beyond inflammation, I think, is immune activation and immune system response. It's, one of the, there are several misnomers, I think, in medicine. But when we think of the immune system as, that's a system that helps us fight off, infections and things, like, yeah, that's partly true, but that's like saying that my phone, I can use it for voice messaging. Yeah, you can use it for voice, but there's so much more to it, right? But yeah, a phone is a phone, right? That's what we grew up with. Or I think that Seinfeld where Jerry gets his dad a electronic doohickey and he calls it a tip calculator because that's the only thing he knows of it, right? But with the immune system, there's so much more that's happening, right? It's regulating our response to cancer cells. We have cancer cells growing in us all the time, and they get suppressed by the immune system. They get caught, they get taken out. It is a marker of what we're being exposed to, and toxicities and exposures. It's essential in longevity. You see these Th1, Th2 flips and all these things that we're starting to understand a little bit better. And when it comes to cardiovascular disease, it is central to all of cardiovascular disease. Yes. Atherosclerosis, I think, is another bad term. It's really atheroscleritis, right? That suffix itis means inflammation. So, atheroscleritis is really inflammation of the blood vessel wall, which is truly what we're dealing with. Hypertension has an inflammatory background. Arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation, the most common arrhythmia on earth, right, stems from inflammation at a microscopic level and mitochondrial dysfunction and ion channel imbalances and things like that. So that's just my little field of cardiology. But then you kind of look beyond hormone imbalance, right? Brain fog, autoimmunity, cancer, as I mentioned, GI distress, orthopedic issues like osteoporosis. All of these things are inflammation gone wild. Yes. Because our bodies are just so revved up. So as we get back to then treating, GLP as a potential anti-inflammatory kind of marker or shutting off inflammation. Yeah, again, it's great that we have that tool to microdose, but let's go back a little bit further and realize that healing the microbiome will, essentially bring that system back into balance, right?
Yes.
Dealing with stress, deep breathing. I do a lot of breath work in my programs, and I'm a breathwork certified breathwork instructor, and just bringing that parasympathetic nervous system into more of an active role, tamping on the brakes and getting that heart rate variability up. And these simple things just put our bodies in such a better state of balance that everything gets better. Right. And so, GLP-1 microdosing, it's a great tool, but again, it's a tool, right? Some people need it more than others, which is fine. Like my plumber probably needs a plunger more often than I do. Right. But it's still a good tool for the both of us. It's just, it's a daily necessity for him, and it's a once in a blue moon necessity for me. Right. But we still need them.
Oh, that's a great analogy. True. And so, and I'd like to, we'll come back after the break, but, and talk a little bit about kind of inflammation and how I see it, and you see it obviously as the underlying cause of a lot of cardiovascular disease, not all. And then, why contemporary medicine is focused on the wrong thing, and how we can combine all, integrative and contemporary together to to make that better. But before we jump over, I would love for people to know, how can they get in touch with you and find your program and find your information and just find you in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So my most active social channel is probably Instagram. So I am at Dr. Sanjay MD. So DoctorSanjay MD, because nobody can spell my last name correctly. And my practice is called the Laguna Institute of Functional Medicine. So you can go to my website, which is lagunamedicine.com. We've got links there to the programs and I see telehealth patients here in California. So there's links to all of that on the page.
That's wonderful. Good. I'd love for people to get more information. So I appreciate that. And then, of course, you're going to be all over my website now. So drpbetterlife.com. And I will have all of that listed so that people can reach out and find out more. We will take a short break. I'm going to let Magna Pharmaceuticals say a short word. They've been so good to me. Dr. Lesser and his wife, Mary, take care of me with Magna Pharmaceuticals. So we'll run that and be right back.
Depression, anxiety, low energy, weakness, these are just some symptoms of low B12 levels. And the absorbable B12 folate supplement that's helping people declare victory over depression symptoms is De Novo Plus B12 by Magna Pharmaceuticals. Patients with symptoms of depression often exhibit low levels of folate and vitamin B12. The human body needs sufficient folate intake to produce the essential neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These neurotransmitters alleviate feelings of sadness, anxiety, and gloom. What makes De Novo Plus B12 so successful? De Novo Plus B12 contains readily absorbable folate and B12. That means it's more successful at correcting the root cause of your deficiency, not just the symptoms. Whether you are suffering with low energy, depression, fatigue, or anxiety, you owe it to yourself to learn more at magnaweb.com. That's magnaweb.com. Please let us know at checkout that you heard about De Novo Plus B12 on The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston. I'm here with Dr. Sanjay Bhojraj, who is a reformed interventional cardiologist now turned functional medicine cardiologist, which we are so thankful for. Thank you. And you've given some great information. And before I left off, kind of mentioned inflammation and underlying heart disease and whatnot. I think, before we started, I bashed statins, which I didn't really mean to do. There's a place for so much, contemporary medicine and some of the medications that we take, like you said, in the right person and way. And so let's touch on that, because a lot of people are very, very confused. They're very confused about what the cause is. And we are just hammered with just get your LDL down, get your LDL down. We know there's so much more to the story. Would you clarify that? And that's another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of the statin debate, I think, really just stems from kind of the way technology grew over time. And I, what I kind of say on this is we're right for the wrong reasons. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when we got our first color television set, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that was, and I can't remember, I think it was CBS at the time, showed the movie The Wizard of Oz, right? So we had just gotten this beautiful wood cabinet, Zenith TV. I mean, it was probably smaller than my computer monitor here, but it was a big deal for us. And The Wizard of Oz was playing, and, I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was a kid's movie. And if you remember in The Wizard of Oz, the first couple of minutes are in black and white, right? And then Dorothy, the tornado happens, and then she goes to Oz, and then it's all color in the yellow brick road and all of these things. And so I remember watching the movie, and it's in black and white. And my mom says, "Oh my gosh, we just bought this expensive TV." And it was an expensive TV at the time. What kind of, and it doesn't translate with the same viscerality as it in English as it does in my native language Marathi. But it was basically a WTF, we bought this fancy TV and it doesn't even work thing. And so I was, I don't know how old, 6, 5, maybe 4, I don't remember. But she was like, can you do something? So go back there and fiddle with the wires or whatever it is. So unknowing, never having seen The Wizard of Oz before, I go back and I literally just jiggle the wires, didn't do much of anything. And that was back in the bunny rabbit days and whatever. And all of a sudden when my mom comes back, the TV is in color, right? And she thinks I did it. Right. And so since then, like I was like the fix it guy for like everything in the house. So, so I was successful, but for the wrong reason. Right. And I think, and I always tell that story, which is very true, by the way. But I always tell that story because that's what I think happened with cardiology, right? Is that initially, when, famously, I think it was FDR or somebody had a heart attack, and our therapy at that time was after a heart attack to put somebody in a dark room with no stimulation for 6 months or some crazy thing, right? And we've evolved quite a bit from there. I mean, it was just not that long ago in the 1980s, the early 1980s, that aspirin use became standard, right? That there was a clinical trial done by actually my former chairman of where I did my training, Doug Weaver, that showed that aspirin reduced the incidence of death after heart attack by 50%, 50, like absolute risk reduction, big deal, right? So that was kind of a landmark thing. So, as time went on and we're looking at risk factors, lipids and serum lipids became an issue. And so at that time you could check triglycerides, you could check total cholesterol, you could check HDL. LDL was a calculated value. And what they saw was people with higher triglycerides, higher LDLs had more cardiovascular events, right? So then it became central to our theme. And I think as a copy paste in all of conventional medicine is when big pharma has a cure, they almost invent the disease, right? So now we've got these statin drugs that can reduce LDL. Well, it must be LDL that is the only thing involved, right? In getting cardiovascular disease. So let's just get everyone's LDL as low as possible. And I remember the evolution of this, and we do keep moving the goalposts, but it's well intentioned, but we keep moving the goalposts. A good cholesterol is 160. No, it's 130. Like LDL. No, it's I'm going through from my med student days, then it was 120 was the goal. Then it was 100. Then it was 70 or less. And now it's like 42 or less. So we keep moving the goalposts with the intention, based on epidemiologic data, that people with lower LDL have lower cardiovascular rates. And if you take fewer shots on goal, you're going to get fewer goals, right? Which makes sense. But what we're missing, I think, and this is where I kind of had a break with conventional medicine. When you look at these trials, number one, they're dealing primarily with high risk patients who are in what's called a secondary prevention mode, meaning they've already had a cardiovascular event. We want to prevent a second one, which is a noble thing to do. Don't get me wrong, right? But even in there, when you're reducing, when you're taking these LDLs to lower numbers, the event rate in the treatment arm is not zero, right? So we're still having people breaking through. But even more frustrating is in patients who've never had a cardiac event, we call that primary prevention. Most of the clinical trials were garbage. Like you did not see any benefit to that, right? So there's something else going on. And that's even on top of half the people who present with a heart attack actually have a normal cholesterol level, normal LDL level, right? So there's something more going on.
Yes.
And so, I think with statins, we have to be very careful. Again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because in the conventional literature, there is clear data that shows an improvement. It doesn't show a cure, right? But it shows an improvement, and that's the most we can hope for. Now, I think, though, we have other cholesterol medications that mechanistically I like a little bit better. So the way that, let me nerd out here for a little bit here, but statins, the way they work is they prevent your body from making cholesterol. So there's an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase, and it so blocks that from happening so you don't form cholesterol. The problem is, as we all know, is that you need cholesterol for healthy membranes, and you need cholesterol for healthy hormones, and you need cholesterol for all sorts of other things, right? And so if you're shutting down the production across the board, that's problematic. And one of the things that all the lipid, the conventional lipidologists love to say, which is true, is that every cell in the body has the ability to synthesize cholesterol, which is true. So the circulating pool of cholesterol of LDL shouldn't matter that much. Yeah, that is true to a point. But if you're dropping the LDL and you're preventing cells, because of the medication you're giving, from creating cholesterol, therein lies the problem, right? Therein, most people don't realize that like testosterone deficiency, one of the most common reasons is statin use, right? And kind of all these things. So, so we have to be very cautious and judicious about the people that we roll that out in, based on the literature that we have available to us, right? We're only as good as the data that we've got. And so now, and so when somebody has a heart attack or has a stroke or has carotid artery disease or whatever it might be, standard of care and the literature suggests that these are people that should be on statin drugs. So I use them in the right population. But now there's this whole new generation of cholesterol medications that work. And these are injectable. And actually just this week or last week in the New England Journal, there's an oral version of this, what's called PCKS9 inhibitor. And basically what that does is it it recycles something called the LDL receptor. So, I like to speak in similes or whatever, so it's like, if you remember Hungry Hippos, right? That game that we played as kids, right? You've got the hippos and you got the marbles and you're just going in there, and as fast as you can hit the button, the hippo is going out there and grabbing these things. Well, imagine you're playing Hungry Hippos where it locks out after one marble. Right. That's essentially what happens in our liver, is that you've got something called an LDL receptor. It's sitting there like a catcher's mitt on the surface of the liver cell. It grabs an LDL particle and it brings it inside. Right. So just like the Hungry Hippo, you catch that payload and you bring it inside. But now you can't open up the catcher's mitt. Right. And that whole thing gets thrown away. Yeah. Right. That's kind of normal, what happens normally. But now with the advent of these new medications, the catcher's mitt can open and you can recycle that LDL receptor. So rather than having 100, you can have 10,000 on there, and you're really pulling out the LDL particles from circulating, which is useful. Why is that better? Because you're unclogging the drain, but the cells, you're preserving the cell's ability to make cholesterol. So now you're not going to see the same testosterone deficiencies. You're not going to get the same mitochondrial disruptions, all of these things. So, so again, getting back to the Wizard of Oz, we were probably right for the wrong reason, right? Like my mom thought I fixed the TV, even though I didn't, right? Because reducing LDL is a part of it, and it's a pretty important part of it, but there's so much else going on. Right. And so when it comes to these medications, and I think that there are people out there, there are cardiologists out there who say LDL, is irrelevant. And I think I think that's a little bit of hyperbole. I think it's relevant, maybe not as much as we think. Right. And so, I still do use statins, but I use them in much tighter controls. And now that I'm seeing, rather than seeing heart attack patients like I did in my previous chapters of my career, I'm seeing kind of what are called these primary prevention patients who have not had cardiovascular events. I use them less and less. Now look, they're cheap and they're easy. And if you tolerate them, they're great. So I'm not saying never, but I think we just have a lot better options. And also think optimizing cardiometabolics, getting your insulin resensitized, because as you're insulin resistant, you've got all this sugar going around, your blood is essentially glucotoxic, and this glucose has to stick to things, right? We use that therapeutically in glycosylated hemoglobin, but it sticks to LDL and then it oxidizes, it rusts on there, and then we get oxidized LDL that ramps up the immune system, getting back to autoimmunity and these things. And so really, I think the central role of the cascade and kind of the work I focus on now is optimizing metabolic health so that LDL does become a little bit less relevant. I'm never going to say irrelevant, but less relevant.
Less relevant. So, I've always said to my patients, and I think you have said this already, that, it is the LDL. We need it. We need to synthesize, hormones and other things, but don't need too much of it. We don't need to, as tell patients, too much of the wrong type of anything is what we're focusing on, right? Yeah. Estrogen's not bad, but too much of the wrong type estrogen can be. And it's the same thing. The LDL, and then LDL, just if there's inflammation underneath, it starts to stick. You mentioned all the glycosylation and the glucose toxicity and everything. It creates inflammation. Then the LDL has a place to go and stick and cause a problem in the first place. Primary prevention, the lifestyle factors, everything. Get a hold of all this before something happens.
Remember, the best way to manage a heart attack is to manage to never get one in the first place.
Exactly. We quote that and put that on every door.
I'm not a big tattoo guy, but maybe that's the tattoo I'll get. Stamp it on my forehead. So that every podcast I go on, or maybe better would be to get a neon sign back there. That might be a little bit less
right back there. Yeah.
I'll do that. That sounds better.
It has a good deal on little neon signs. I got those for, the kids. They loved it. So there you go. I'll get you one. No, that's awesome. Listen, this has been such wonderful information. You are such a blessing. Thank you. And you can see why everybody out there, why it's enjoyable to hear speak, just very relatable, very, very funny, and lots of great analogies and all. You've really clarified a lot of things.
Say that. I need you to say that into the mic clearly, that I'm funny, so my daughters can believe it, because I've got triplet girls and I just get eye rolls from them, but they're teenagers, right?
I'm sure you can hear the eye rolls from across the house. I've got those too. Believe it. But, my God.
Love it. But it was so great being here, and it's so fun talking about this. And I think that we need to realize that cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of people, right? Cancer is number 2. And medical errors are number 3, right? This is an Institute of Medicine report, right? That laid those out. But if you are well, right? If you are reducing that inflammation, if you're exercising, if you are getting the right mindset, sleep, all of these things, cardiovascular disease rates go down, cancer rates go down, and you're not going to be in the hospital to be a victim of a medical error, right? So this is really high yield stuff that we're talking about to help improve your health, right? Because really, when we talk about healthcare in the conventional sense, we're so worried about the care that we forget about the health, right? And now we're really focusing on how do we keep you healthy so you don't need the care. Right.
Exactly.
And that's the work I know, Dr. Pinkston, that you're doing. That's the work that I'm doing, and it's so important for everybody. So, if this connects with you guys, share this podcast with like 10 of your friends. Like everyone's got 5 to 10 people you care about, right? Get them to listen, whether it's me, whether it's anybody, I don't care, but just get people to listen, to understand that we need to get out of the sick care system and really focus on health. And that does not happen with medications. That happens with foundational changes of diet, lifestyle, and mindset.
Absolutely. Gosh, well said. Thank you. Thank you for that. So one more time, where can people find you?
Absolutely. So my website is lagunamedicine.com. So www.lagunamedicine.com. You can probably Google me. I'm probably the only Sanjay Bhojraj on earth. So that's one way. And then you can find me on Instagram or all the socials I don't know what the right preposition is there, but at Dr. Sanjay MD, DoctorSanjay MD.
Absolutely. And all of this will be available to you on drpbetterlife.com. And you can see all the rest of my wonderful podcasts. Well, I've been doing this for almost 4 years. Can you believe it?
Wow.
But yeah, drpbetterlife.com. You can find all of his information and drag you down and listen to more wonderful information. You need a podcast, sir.
I do. I have one, actually. It's called The Curious Cardiologist.
Somebody shoot me right now, foot in mouth. Where's my water? I'll wash it down. And so,
wait, say that again. I love Texas phrases. What was that one?
I just give me some water to wash down my foot. That's So
I just started it a few, like maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And so it's just up and running, but it's really cool. The thesis of my podcast is we're looking at old problems in new ways. And that's really looking at cardiovascular, looking at metabolic syndrome. I had a nephrologist on the other day looking at kidney disease, but we need to get people better at scale because we're getting sick at scale. Right. Absolutely. And so that doesn't happen with meds. Like I said, it really just happens with foundational principles, diet, lifestyle, and mindset.
Absolutely. Please, the name again. And I'm going to make
The Curious Cardiologist. So I'm on Apple and Spotify and YouTube and all the places where podcasts are, where you'd like to listen to your podcast, whatever I'm supposed to say there.
That will be on. I will provide a link to that as well. I want to get you out. That's beautiful. Okay. Well, great. So, yes, everybody, I thank you for listening in. Thank you for being on. It's been such an honor. And I'll be seeing you again at A4M. I'll run into you and say hello.
Rock and roll. I can't wait.
All right. Awesome. Everybody have a fantastic week and please take care of each other.
You've been enjoying The Better Life with Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston. For more information, go to drpthebetterlife.com. That's drpthebetterlife.com. And listen next week for The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.